T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit's fun.
I don't know about you guys, but the first Sunday without football was really difficult for me. The only way I've been able to get through it so far has been watching college basketball. College basketball has been pretty entertaining to watch. I'm watching UConn, Creighton on the other side of me right now. I picked Creighton to win the game. They're up 41-29, and there's just so much excitement in college basketball that really kind of gives me a little bit of that football itch in a sense. You know, with football, you watch the Super Bowl, you watch the week 1 opening game, and you're excited to watch your team every single week, especially if your team's in the playoffs. And for college football and the NFL, they got the longest offseason out of any sports league, which is really annoying. So the only way I've been able to somewhat quench my thirst for football has been watching college basketball because it's just so exciting to watch. But just because the NFL season is over doesn't mean there's not a reason to still be excited and not a reason to still be glued to your TV screen or your cell phone screen, keeping up to date with the latest news in the NFL, because the franchise tag deadline is just around the corner. Today marks the start of when teams can begin to put the franchise tag on players that they want to give a little bit more time to work out a long-term deal with. We also are going to be talking about the state of the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. I got some Justin Fields trade scenarios cooked up for you guys. Many people don't know what is Justin Fields' true trade value, but I got a good read on what I think the Bears could get in return for him. Quarterback transfers that could make big impacts for their new college football teams. My Elko, he's going into his first season at Texas A&M. What could be in store for him down in College Station? And are we in the final days of the Billy Naiper era at Florida? Welcome to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast, and we are available on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Share the pods with your friends, family members, and acquaintances if you enjoy. Before we get into it, here's a word from our partner, Mint Mobile. Does it piss you off how much you pay for your monthly phone bill? Why are you getting frustrated when our partner Mint Mobile has plans as low as $15 a month that give you unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network? Stop getting frustrated with how much you spend on your monthly phone bill and go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports in description and pinned comment down below to get access to premium wireless for only $15 a month. That's only $15 a month. Switching to Mint is easy. It only takes 15 minutes to do. If you're pissed off with how much you pay for your monthly phone bill, switch to Mint Mobile today and go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports in description and pin comment down below to get premium wireless for only $15 a month. Stop getting upset with how much you spend on your monthly phone bill and switch to Mint Mobile today. The first week after the Super Bowl is really interesting because it's a quiet time of the year where people are focused on the Senior Bowl, and then you have the other portion, which is when you have contract disputes between teams and players that haven't been figured out yet, and they got to put the franchise tag on them to buy themselves more time to come to a long-term deal. And the franchise tag deadline starts and ends March 5th from the beginning of January, or not. Oh my goodness, man. Can we run that back? All right. After the Super Bowl is a really interesting time of the offseason because you have new head coaches who have just gotten hired, and then you have the franchise tag discussion. Which players and teams aren't going to be able to come to an agreement on a long-term deal? Who's going to need a little bit more time to work things out? And the franchise tag period begins February 20th and it ends March 5th. So this is the time where teams have to figure out who are they going to put that franchise tag on and try to work out a long-term deal with, and which of their star players are going to end up leaving in free agency. And I got some franchise tag predictions for you guys who I think is going to end up getting the franchise tag. And we got to begin with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You may want it to be Mike Evans. Some say Antoine Winfield, but I don't see how the Buccaneers don't put the franchise tag on Baker Mayfield. He may not be an elite quarterback, but he was a really good quarterback this season. And Dave Canales is gone, but as long as they still have a good team around Baker Mayfield, they should be able to find a way to give him a long-term deal that should be a fairly reasonable contract. He shouldn't be getting anywhere more than $27 to $29 million, maybe 30 max. But for right now, you may not be able to come to an agreement with Baker Mayfield just because of you having these situations with Antoine Winfield and Mike Evans. So you might as well just go ahead, put the franchise tag on Baker Mayfield, because you can't afford to let him walk in free agency, because then other teams are going to be able to outbid you. At least with the franchise tag, you could work out a little bit more of some situations that will free up your cap space a little bit more to give Baker Mayfield that long-term extension. And then maybe you can find a way to keep Mike Evans and focus on prioritizing him, and you can just get Baker Mayfield right later, because Mike Evans is probably a top 5 Tampa Bay Buccaneer player of all time. And you got to take care of the brother. The brother has been loyal to you. He's taken pay cuts. He's restructured his deal. And now it's time for him to get back what he's not been getting in the past, sacrificing for this franchise. But on the other end, it's a business. Mike Evans is on the other end of 30, and he could start to regress at any year. There's no date on Father Time. When it hits you out of nowhere, and you never see it coming. But Baker Mayfield, if you can't get a long-term deal worked out with him, you got to give him the franchise tag, because he's a really good option out there. Kirk Cousins is coming off a really concerning injury that ended his season last year, and we don't really know how that injury is going to impact him with how old he is. Therefore, Baker Mayfield would be the best option out there. He's young, has a lot of juice in the tank. He's coming off a really good season. And if you give Baker Mayfield a good supporting cast and a good play caller, like a team such as Denver with Sean Payton, or hell, even the New England Patriots, if they have a good offensive coordinator and they improve their supporting cast, Baker Mayfield could win you some games, and you possibly could contend. But you see, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in a situation where they have to worry about Mike Evans, Antoine Winfield, and you can't afford to franchise tag one of those guys and just to let Baker Mayfield walk out the door and test free agency, because I don't think he's going to end up coming back, because there are so many teams that are going to be throwing a lot of money at him because he's a really good quarterback in the right situation. And there are teams that are probably going to be willing to overpay for a guy like Baker Mayfield with how limited of options there are at quarterback in this year's free agency pool. So Baker Mayfield, I don't see how he doesn't get the franchise tag. Now, if they can find a way to get him locked up for the next couple of years, then I expect that they probably put it on Mike Evans. Brian Burns needs to get the franchise tag. Okay, the Carolina Panthers and him have been going at it on rather they were going to stick together and get a long-term deal worked out, or if he was going to get traded, because if I remember last offseason, there were rumors how the Carolina Panthers were shopping him around. And the Rams wanted to get him for 2 first-round picks, but they didn't want to pull the trigger. And it seems like they really do want to get a long-term deal with Brian Burns worked out, but he's asking for $30 million reportedly. And Carolina doesn't seem like they're willing to give him $30 million a year. It seems like they want to give him $25 to $28 million, somewhere around that range. And Brian Burns is a really good pass rusher. He's a B-tier pass rusher. But he's not an A-tier pass rusher like a Myles Garrett or a TJ Watt, where he's good enough where he can win 2-3 games for you. So I think for the Carolina Panthers, when you got a guy like him, you can't allow him to just walk for free. You got to at least try to get him locked up long term, or try to trade him and get something in return for him. You missed a very golden opportunity when the Rams came at you with those 2 first-round picks. You can find solid pass rushers in the draft. You should have been gotten rid of Brian Burns. And at this point, you kind of are in a situation where your back is against the wall because you didn't want to trade him and you missed your opportunity to get him locked up before he had the big season he just had this season. He had 12 and a half sacks in 2022. And this season, he had 8 sacks. So he's on his way to becoming a elite tier pass rusher. So now his value has gone up based on what he did last season. So if you weren't going to give this dude what he was asking for, you should have already traded him because you knew what he was wanting. So the Carolina Panthers, they have no choice but to franchise tag him because you missed your opportunity to get some value for him. And now your back is against the wall because you waited too long to make a decision to extend him last offseason or to get rid of him. And now with the production that he's had based on the last 2 years, he kind of has a point to get $30 million a year. Because if he definitely is available in free agency, there are plenty of teams that will give him maybe more than $30 million a year. So you got to franchise tag him, try to get some value for him or sign him long term. And you might not have a choice but to just give him $30 million a year if that's what he's asking for, if you want to keep him around. Jalen Johnson is coming off the best season of his career. He was a second-team All-Pro. He only gave up 2 touchdowns this season. He had 10 pass breakups, 4 interceptions, which was a career high for him. And there were rumors around the trade deadline this past season that he was getting shopped around. The Steelers, the 49ers, and a bunch of other teams had interest in trading for him, but the Bears didn't trade him away. And I'm guessing that means that they do want to give him a long-term extension, and they got the cap space to do so. I don't know why they haven't done so already. And he's a big part of Matt Eberflus' defense. And if Matt Eberflus is going to be able to save his job next season, you definitely need to make sure that you keep this guy around. It just makes a lot of sense for them to put the tag on him. They're going to pay him what he's asking for. He deserves top-end money. And they got the cap space to do so. So it'll be really weird and surprising if they don't pay Jalen Johnson. I mean, they got no reason why they shouldn't. And they got the means to do so. So Jalen Johnson is going to get the franchise tag. Kirk Cousins is coming off a really concerning injury that kept him out for the remainder of last season. And with his age being a really big question because you don't know if he's going to be the same quarterback that he was prior to that injury. And the Minnesota Vikings, you don't know if you're going to be able to trade up for one of the top quarterbacks in this year's draft. Therefore, you need to keep Kirk Cousins around. Even with him coming off that injury, I don't think he'll be bad to the point where he won't be starter quality anymore. You'll at least be able to stay around and win a few games, maybe make a playoff push or two with him for the next 2-3 years. But you definitely have to start looking at the future. But right now, there's no better options. You got to franchise tag Kirk Cousins if you're not going to give him a long-term deal. And there's every reason why you shouldn't give him a long-term deal. So you might as well just franchise tag him for this season. Let him play on the tag. Try to get a 2-year deal worked out. Maybe you just keep franchise tagging him for the next 2 years while you draft the quarterback and you just let him develop and you just keep putting the franchise tag on Kirk Cousins because you can do it for the next 4 years because Washington did it to Kirk Cousins before. So he's not new to this. He understands how it goes. And I don't think it would be anything wrong with him playing on the franchise tag because you become one of the highest paid at your position for that season while you're on it. So for Minnesota, franchise tagging Kirk Cousins is a must. And Justin Jefferson, you're trying to get him locked up long term. And right now, he's making a bunch of demands. And I don't know if they're true or not, but allegedly, he's saying that he wants Kirk Cousins back because he wants to know what the quarterback situation is going to look like. So you kind of don't have a choice but to put the tag on Kirk Cousins. You got money to make it happen. And even if you don't want to give him a fully guaranteed deal for the next 2-3 years, there's a way that you can find a way to keep him around while you find a younger option that can develop behind him. But you can't let this dude walk away, even without his injury. There's still teams that would get Kirk Cousins. Leonard Williams, the Seattle Seahawks traded for him from the New York Giants, and he's coming off a really good year. He is one of the better, more underrated interior defensive linemen in the league. And against the Dallas Cowboys Thursday night, he was absolutely destroying them. He was a one-man wrecking crew. Seattle, they probably want to get him secured for the next 3-4 years. He'll probably retire a Seattle Seahawk because once this contract ends, wherever he goes, if it's in Seattle or elsewhere, he'll probably retire. Because I do expect that he will decline. But right now, he still is a premium player despite his age, and he may be one of those players where he's like Cam Hayward. He gets better as he ages. He's still really good against the run. He's really formidable against the pass. Hell, some seasons he's really effective getting after the quarterback. Some seasons, not so much. But in terms of looking for a run defender that's really good at penetrating and getting behind the line of scrimmage and creating a lot of havoc, Leonard Williams is your guy. You got Mike McDonald, that's your new head coach. He was able to elevate Jadeveon Clowney to a level that we haven't seen him play at in the last 4 or 5 years. Imagine what he could do with Leonard Williams. So, Seattle, I expect them to franchise tag him. Christian Wilkins is coming off the best season of his NFL career. He went from becoming a really elite run stopper to becoming not just that, but really good at getting after the quarterback. And it's really hard to find interior defensive linemen that can give you 9 sacks in the season. Now, we don't know if he's consistently going to be able to give you 9 sacks plus a year, but realistically, he'll probably be around 6 or 7, 8 at the most. And at this point, he probably deserves to be paid like one of the highest paid defensive linemen in the National Football League. You might not have to give him Aaron Donald money, but you're definitely going to have to give him a pretty hefty sum. And it might take you a while to figure some of that stuff out because your cap situation right now isn't ideal, but you got to find a way to put that franchise tag on your boy Christian Wilkins. He is your best player on defense. He's better than Jalen Ramsey. And the national media doesn't really talk about this dude like that, but there's nothing that he can't do. He is an incredible athlete. He is a really good leader in the locker room. I was watching Hard Knocks not too long ago, and the team really rallies behind Christian Wilkins and his high motor and the energy that he puts out on the field every single play. He's like the heart and soul of that defense. I don't see how they don't franchise tag him. I would be really blowed if they were to let him walk away, because that would be devastating to not just that team, but that locker room also. L'Jarius Sneed for the Kansas City Chiefs is coming off a stellar performance during this playoff run that they just had, winning their second consecutive Super Bowl. And you may say that Chris Jones deserves to get the franchise tag, but he's 30 plus years old now. He's probably going to start regressing, and he's not going to regress immediately because he's a Hall of Fame caliber player. Hall of Fame caliber players regress at a slower rate, but it's just that you got to prioritize your younger players. L'Jarius Sneed, you drafted him in the middle portion of the 2020 NFL draft. He's your best cover corner right now. He's one of the better cornerbacks in the league. And you got to find a way to lock him up long term because he's a staple of that defense. You can't allow him to walk away. L'Jarius Sneed, with how young he is compared to Chris Jones and the production that you're getting out of him, you got to give him the tag over Chris Jones. It's just how it goes. Now, Chris Jones at the Super Bowl celebration said that he wanted to come back. We'll see if it happens. So if that is true, then I figure they'll make it work. But L'Jarius Sneed, regardless, has to get the tag, because if he hits free agency, I want my Steelers to go after him. Everybody's going to be willing to pay him anything that he wants. So Kansas City has to franchise tag him. Even if Chris Jones was just talking and he really does plan on chasing the money in free agency, you still got to let him walk in favor of L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed is just way younger than him, and you just have so many years left out of him of elite play compared to Chris Jones, who you give him this deal and he's going to regress. T. Higgins obviously is not going to go anywhere. All right, he's coming off a down season, but that's due to injuries, but he still is one of the better receivers in the league. He's a number one receiver on most teams. And Cincinnati wants to make sure that they can keep that duo with him, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow alive. So I don't see him not getting the franchise tag. I don't know when they're going to give him that big time contract extension, but right now, until they can figure that out, you got to put the franchise tag on T. Higgins. I don't see how he does hit free agency. Many people have been speculating that he's going to be available in free agency. Every free agency prediction video that I watch, I see him going to some team, either the Carolina Panthers or the Houston Texans in free agency. But Cincinnati has cap space, and they got enough money to keep T. Higgins and Jamar Chase around for Joe Burrow. You may not be able to have it all defensively, but you got some young players that are stepping up defensively. And as long as you're able to continue to draft well like you have the last couple of years, you should be fine on that end of the ball. But right now, you got to make sure that you can keep Joe Burrow's number 2 option at Cincy. So T. Higgins, I expect him to get the franchise tag. Justin Madubuike was a second team All-Pro this year. He had 13 sacks. Without a doubt, Baltimore is going to franchise tag him. Their cap situation isn't great. They're going to have to free some money up. They're going to have to work some things. But Justin Madubuike, no way he's going to leave Baltimore. You get a defensive tackle that gives you 13 sacks in the season. Do you know how rare that is? Not a lot of D tackles can even give you 8 sacks consistently year to year. So when you get somebody like Justin Madubuike, not only do you have to pay him, but you got to pay him like the Aaron Donalds of the world. You know, this is just one season, but this is 13 sacks. And 9 times out of 10, he still is going to be giving you 10 sacks a season. He's up there. You know, maybe not Aaron Donald, but you got to give him something like that. You know, this is somebody that's probably going to command like maybe $90 million over the next 3-4 years. You know, that's a lot of money for an interior defensive lineman. But you get somebody like him that's giving you 13 sacks in the season as a defensive tackle? Come on, man. You got to make sure that you can keep him around. Josh Allen is the best draft pick that the Jaguars have made in the last couple of seasons. And did you know that he could be the first Jaguars player since nearly a decade to actually get an extension after being drafted by Jacksonville? Like, Jacksonville does not keep their first round picks around. Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Fournette, those guys didn't get extensions after their rookie deals were up. As a matter of fact, they either got cut or traded before they even ended, and they got extensions elsewhere. Josh Allen had 17.5 sacks this season. Without a doubt, you got to pay this man. And you know what? Jacksonville really kicked themselves in the foot because they had the opportunity to get Josh Allen on a discount last offseason. If they would have paid the man last offseason, they wouldn't have to pay him the amount that they're going to have to pay him this offseason. This offseason, you probably got to pay him 30 plus. You do. You got to pay him $30 million a year. Last offseason, you probably could have got him for maybe 27 or 26 million a year. But since you played around and you dragged it out and you let him play this season, now he's about to make you pay in your wallet. And this is the upside of players who don't decide to sit out during the season and actually play and continue to perform and overachieve. Josh Allen has the right to become one of the highest paid pass rushers in the league. I mean, based on what he did last season, 17 and a half sacks, he's a 2-time Pro Bowler. The Jaguars got to pay the man like a top-end pass rusher. And, he's probably going to break the bank, but you got to get it done. And that probably isn't going to get done anytime soon because you got to put the tag on them. Right now, it doesn't seem like you're in an ideal situation with what's going on with Calvin Ridley. Are you going to pay him? Are you going to let him walk? Are you going to give up that draft pick to the Atlanta Falcons? What you going to do? So right now, you got to put Josh Allen on the back burner, but he's one of those players that if you're a Jags fan, they're going to pay him. There's no way they're not going to pay Josh Allen. They're going to pay him. So this is it for my 2024 NFL franchise tag predictions, the players that I believe that are going to get the franchise tag this offseason. Let me know some players that I missed, some players that you agree with, some that you disagree with, down in the comment section down below. Before we move on, if we haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are available on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. Give us a 5-star review. We'll greatly appreciate it. Shout out to everybody in the comment section. Should the Giants place the franchise tag on Barkley over McKinney? I don't think the Giants should put the franchise tag on any of them. If you're going to give Saquon Barkley a long-term deal, give him a long-term deal. They should have did it last offseason, and this offseason, it doesn't seem like they're really prioritizing him right now. You might as well just let him walk, if that's going to be the case. And McKinney, probably, I don't know what they're going to do in that direction. They're going to have a new defensive coordinator. And right now, they got to fix that offensive line. They got to improve the interior of that defensive line. So we'll see what they do with that. But I really don't see them putting the franchise tag on any of them. All right, now let's talk about the state of the franchise. Now, the state of the franchise is a series that I do at the start of every offseason where I evaluate the state of every team going into not just this offseason, but the start of next year, where they are. Are they contenders? Are they in a rebuild? Are they going in the right direction? Are they going in the wrong direction? And we're going to start with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions were America's team this year. Everybody was rooting for the Detroit Lions to win. And when they lost to the 49ers in the NFC Championship, our hearts were crushed. All right. Now, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the Detroit Lions Super Bowl opportunity next season. Because next year, you have both your coordinators coming back, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn. Both of those two guys got head coaching interviews. They were finalists for multiple jobs, if not one or two. You got Dan Campbell, who has proven to be one of the better coaches in the league. And I don't have a problem with his aggressiveness, but maybe he can find a way to be a little bit more smarter and when to pick his spots. You look at this roster, the majority of this team is fairly young, and they destroyed last year's draft. Everybody was giving them D- and Fs, saying Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta were bad picks. You don't draft those positions that high in today's football. Well, they proved a lot of people wrong. All right, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are one of the best, if not the number one-two punch at running back in the NFL right now. All right, Sam Laporta, to me, already is like the third best tight end in the NFL. Hell, I wanted to say he was the best tight end in the league this year because he was better than Travis Kelce for a good stretch of the regular season. So you got Sam Laporta right now that already is one of the best at his position. You got Jahmyr Gibbs, who you think about how deadly he was as a rookie. Imagine what's going to happen next season when Ben Johnson finally allows Jahmyr Gibbs to take more snaps at wide receiver. And they truly utilized Jahmyr Gibbs as the weapon that he was coming out of Alabama. You see, Jahmyr Gibbs just wasn't a traditional running back. He was a weapon. You can find different ways to get him the ball. He's good enough to be a wide receiver too, if you give him the opportunity to develop and get snaps at that position. He's just one of those guys with his quick start acceleration, how deadly he is after the catch, after contact. You want to find a way to get him the football in very different and creative ways. And then you look at how good their offensive line is. Jared Goff is playing like a top 10 quarterback right now. You're going to have to give him an extension fairly soon. The biggest problem that the Lions had this season was their cornerbacks. Their cornerbacks were atrocious this year. And their secondary is going to be a big question going into this offseason during free agency and the draft. It's going to be fascinating to see how they're going to address it. Because Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is going to be a free agent. You only signed him to a one-year deal last offseason, and he missed the majority of this season due to injury. Now, rather you keep him around, I think that you most likely will bring him back. I don't see why you wouldn't. You know, he was pretty good when he did play, and I do think that he's a really good, impactful player in the locker room and on the field. He always seems to have a nose for the football. But you got to move on with whoever you have starting at cornerback. Cam Sutton and your other starting cornerback has to go. You got to find a way to get one of the best cornerbacks in this year's draft, which the cornerback class this year isn't that great, but there's a couple of gems there. Maybe try to address it in free agency or trade for a corner, but you can't run it back with Cam Sutton and the corners that you had this past season next year and expect to win the Super Bowl with those guys. This defense has to improve. They got to get another pass rusher. They signed the Canadian dude that had one of the best seasons ever for a Canadian pass rusher, so we'll see how he works out. But Aiden Hutchinson is starting to become a guy now. Now, he ain't on that Myles Garrett, TJ Watt level right now, but he's still a B-tier pass rusher. But next season, I expect him to take that next step where he really becomes somebody who is impacting games, and he could end up winning 3-4 games with the Lions. You know, just by himself with his impact, he could become an MVP caliber player. That's how much potential Aiden Hutchinson has. We'll see if he'll reach that next year. Overall, the Lions are in a very good position to capture a Super Bowl. They have youth. They have consistently good quarterback play. You got 2 stud coordinators. Your defense needs some slight improvement, but you have cap space. You have some draft capital. Next season, you could really go into this thing becoming one of the top 2 teams in the NFC. Because outside of the 49ers, everything else is up for grabs. Now, Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers are coming. And we'll see what happens with Minnesota. But right now, with just how great your coaching staff is and the culture that Dan Campbell has built and the momentum that you guys have going into next season, you guys are probably one of the teams that has the best chances of making it back to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. You got a better chance than San Francisco. They are going to have to bring in a new defensive coordinator. They have some personnel issues. The Detroit Lions right now are in the prime spot to win a Super Bowl. So in terms of the state of the Detroit Lions, they're heading in the right direction. And the Lions are one of those teams that next season, everybody's going to be betting on to be a sleeper pick to win the Super Bowl, even though they probably will be like the second or the best team from a talent standpoint in the NFC. Jordan Love really was something this year, boy. He had a stretch from Thanksgiving all throughout the playoffs when he was arguably the 5th best quarterback in the National Football League. And it's just ridiculous how the Green Bay Packers just have the secret formula to finding and developing franchise quarterbacks. They went from Brett Starr to Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. He had 32 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. And if it wasn't for him making some rookie mistakes during his final drive against the San Francisco 49ers, they probably could have been in the conference championship game. And I know he wasn't a rookie, but I call him rookie mistakes because technically that was his rookie season because it was his first season starting. And he started out a little bit rocky at the start. His first two games were pretty good. But then during the next couple of 6-7 weeks until like Thanksgiving, he struggled. But then after the Detroit Lions win, a flip just switched. Okay? And Jordan Love is going to go as far as what Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers supporting cast is going to be able to put around him. And they have one of the best young receiving corps in the NFL. And if Jordan Love ends up playing at an MVP level this year and these receivers really take that next step, this is a team that's going to be really dangerous. And they probably could be the best team in the NFC next season, which may sound crazy to say, but think about it. Jordan Love was a first-round pick. And you see, Patrick Mahomes is the reason why you trade up all that capital to go get a guy like a Jordan Love in the first round. You want to know why? Because you need an elite quarterback if you want to be able to win. And the teams that go the furthest in the playoffs are the teams that have great quarterback play. The 49ers are the only team that can get away with it, maybe not having elite QBs because they have such a great team around Brock Purdy. But for the Green Bay Packers, if your supporting cast ends up elevating as well along with Jordan Love, and let's say Jaden Reed, Christian Watson can stay healthy and they end up developing into really good receivers or elite receivers, this is going to be a really nasty offense. We forgot how good Aaron Jones was this season. And the offensive line, not only do they have really good starters, but they have great depth behind their offensive starters on the line. Now, defensively, they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, and Jeff Hafley, who previously was the defensive coordinator for Boston College. Boston College had really good defenses under Jeff Hafley. I was a little bit shocked that he left Boston College, and he took a little bit of a demotion, but I don't blame him with the current state of college football, him deciding to jump to the NFL. But there's a lot of talent for him to work with. You got a really good defensive line. You got Rashawn Gary, who is one of those players that if he's good enough and he can stay healthy, he could win Defensive Player of the Year. Then you also have, Jair Alexander. I expect him to stay around with a new defensive coordinator. Maybe he just didn't get along with Joe Barry, but I don't expect him to get traded. Having a shutdown corner like Jair is just a little bit too valuable in this league just to be trading away and trying to find a replacement in the draft or something like that. You're better off keeping Jair Alexander. Just tell him not to walk out for the coin toss again, or just make him a captain. He played well in the playoffs. He had a really good game against the 49ers that not too many people talked about. So defensively, Jeff Hafley has all the talent in the world to have a top 10 defense. And next season, if this offense continues to hum the way that it did during their playoff run, and they can have somewhat of a good defense, I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in the Super Bowl. Because Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. And right now, he's a top 6, top 7 quarterback, just based on how hot he ended the season. And there were stretches when I was watching him during the playoff game against the Dallas Cowboys where I thought this dude was damn near unstoppable. And even against the 49ers, if it wasn't for those 2 interceptions, the Green Bay Packers probably would have scored. They barely punted in that game. There was some throws that I seen Jordan Love make that made me go, how the hell did he manage to pull that off? He was making all those throws across his body, outside of the pocket. Now, eventually, it kicked him into you-know-what, because those same throws that he was making outside the pocket, across his body, throwing no-look passes to guys, ended up costing Green Bay the game against the 49ers. But outside of those mistakes, Jordan Love was damn near flawless in the divisional round against San Fran. And this team is only going to go as far as Jordan Love takes them. And right now, you still aren't on the same level as the Detroit Lions because they just have an overall better team than you. This is because they've drafted so well. They've made some really good signings in free agency over the last couple of years. But with Jordan Love in ascension mode, which is when a young quarterback starts to really hit his stride and starts to reach his ceiling, starts to play up to his potential, just based on you having an elite quarterback, that would give you the leg up on the Detroit Lions. Because Jared Goff wouldn't be able to outplay a guy like a Jordan Love because there are things that he simply can't do that Jordan Love can. So the Green Bay Packers are going in a really good direction. Let me know how you guys feel about the state of the Green Bay Packers down in the comment section down below. Justin Fields is one of the biggest storylines of this offseason. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen to Justin Fields. Is he going to remain QB1 in Chicago, or is he going to get traded elsewhere? And the biggest question that people are asking right now is, if Justin Fields gets traded by Chicago, what would they want in return for him? So I'm here to cook up some potential Justin Fields trade scenarios for you guys, and I have a lot of good ones that I'm pretty sure you guys are definitely going to agree with. So Justin Fields gets traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers give the Chicago Bears the 51st pick in the second round of the 2024 NFL Draft, their third round pick, which they acquired from the Rams. And the Steelers get Justin Fields in a 6th round pick for 2025. And the reason why they got to give the Steelers a 6th round pick is just because you just can't trade Justin Fields and not give up just a little bit of value, because they are giving you a 2nd rounder. And Justin Fields, you are going to have to make a decision if you're Pittsburgh on his 5th year option. Are you going to accept it? Or are you going to decline it? But the upside is there where you have to give up a 2nd round pick for a guy like Justin Fields. You're not going to give up a 1st round pick for Justin Fields because he's not good enough to warrant the 1st round pick. But I say Justin Fields right now is a top 17, top 18-ish quarterback. And with the fact that he has that hidden upside that, Chicago can pitch to Pittsburgh, hey, like, Justin Fields has the potential to be an MVP caliber player. Do you not see Lamar Jackson, who you have to play twice in the season? He could be just as good as that. If not, maybe better. So you pitch that potential. And with Arthur Smith being somebody who's run heavy, likes to utilize dual threat quarterbacks, he would be a perfect fit. So Pittsburgh, giving up a 2nd and 3rd round pick is the right value when you have a guy like Justin Fields who is a decent starter, but also has the potential to be a really good starter. Maybe a top 10, top 5 QB. Now, next up, we got Justin Fields getting traded to the Denver Broncos. What would the Denver Broncos have to give up in return for Justin Fields? Well, the Chicago Bears need another number 2 receiver to pair alongside of DJ Moore. Now, they could draft one in the draft. Maybe they get Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze out of Washington. But why not get Jerry Jeudy? Jerry Jeudy is still on a rookie deal. He's a player that has a lot of upside. It's just that he struggles with drops occasionally, and also he's held back by poor quarterback play. But you got Shane Waldron now as your offensive coordinator who really likes to push the football downfield. And Jerry Jeudy is a really good route runner. He creates a lot of separation. He gets open. He just needs a quarterback to throw him the football. You get Caleb Williams, I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to utilize a guy like Jerry Jeudy. He's really crafty with his route running because Caleb Williams is one of those guys that likes to make a lot of things happen after the first 4 or 5 seconds, and he's getting outside the pocket. He's spinning around, becoming Houdini, and you're going to need receivers
that are going to be able to run around with Caleb Williams and that can keep up with him and make catches for him. And Jerry Jeudy would be the right guy with that skill set that he has. So Denver would give up Jerry Jeudy, their 4th-round pick in this year's draft, their 5th-round selection in this year's draft, and then Chicago would give up Justin Fields and the 7th-round pick for 2025. Now, if the New England Patriots trade for Justin Fields, I believe they got to give up Detroit Wise Jr. I know he's 29 years old and he's pushing 30, and that's normally when players like him start to regress, but he's still a really good player at his age. The Chicago Bears have to beef up their interior of their defensive line. You already have Montez Sweat. Detroit Wise would be a really good pickup for you. And you get a 2nd-round pick from the Patriots. Now, the reason why you don't get another pick like how the Steelers and the Broncos have to give up is because you're getting a high-end 2nd-rounder. You know, the 34th selection in this year's draft is probably the equivalent to a 1st-round pick because this is the area of the 2nd round where you can still find 1st-round value. So, therefore, with a pick that high, you don't really need a 3rd or 4th rounder to go along with it. And if you're New England, you really don't have to give that up because essentially you still got a 1st-round selection. And then you get Justin Fields in the 7th-round pick, and Justin Fields would be a really different kind of quarterback that we've never seen New England have. But you got Gerard Mayo, who, if he wants to be a little bit different than Bill Belichick and succeed and try some different things, you know, and try to modernize something that Bill Belichick struggled to do, Justin Fields would be a really good pickup for him. He's a young quarterback with upside who has potential to be really good. And you're in a division where, you know, outside of the Buffalo Bills, the New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins aren't really in the greatest positions because they're going to have to work some things out with their cap situation. The New York Jets have a lot of turmoil. They don't have a great coaching staff. We know Aaron Rodgers has been good in the past, but how good is he going to be coming off that injury? We don't know. So therefore, you need a quarterback that has the upside to be able to go toe-to-toe with a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Josh Allen in that Miami Dolphins offense. And Justin Fields potentially could give you that. And then you just trade away Mac Jones for maybe a 6th or 7th round pick. Now, my last trade scenario that I have, Justin Fields getting traded to the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons will have to give up their 2nd round pick in this year's draft and their 3rd round pick that they got from the Jaguars. Now, Atlanta gets a 7th rounder in 2025 in Justin Fields. Now, the reason why this trade makes sense for Atlanta is because you got Raheem Morris. He picked up the offensive coordinator off Sean McVay's staff. You know how that goes. And right now, they don't have a QB1. Justin Fields is from around the area, hometown kid. You can use that to sell more tickets, sell merch, you know, get people in the stadium, get people excited. You got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, B. John Robinson, and Tyler Algier in the backfield. The backfield with Justin Fields and B. John Robinson would be nasty. Like, do you guys not know how unstoppable the Falcons offense could be? If they get Justin Fields, they got to make it happen. They just have to trade for Justin Fields. Now, I want Justin Fields to get traded to the Steelers because I'm a Steelers fan, but if he were to get traded to any other team, I want to see him playing for the red and black. I want to see him playing for the Dirty Birds. It would be a really good addition for the Falcons picking up a guy like Justin Fields because at least you know you could get serviceable quarterback play. He could easily become the best quarterback in the division. We don't know what's going to happen with Bryce Young. Baker Mayfield is good, but Justin Fields has potential to be better than Baker Mayfield. And Derek Carr is Derek Carr. So these are my 4 possible trade scenarios that I've cooked up for what Justin Fields' potential value could be. I know you guys are probably going to disagree in the comment section, but if you disagree, let me know what you would be willing to give up for Justin Fields if you were the general manager for a team that had to trade for him. Would you give up a second? Would you give up a fourth? Would you give up a seventh? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Before we move on, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Gotta get a sip of water real quick. Now, we know the transfer portal is a really big thing in college football. And one of the biggest pickups that you can make in the transfer portal is getting a star quarterback. Remember Joe Burrow with 2019 LSU? He was a transfer portal pickup, and he proved to be one of the best transfer portal quarterbacks of all time. Same thing with Baker Mayfield. So, I'm about to give you guys my list of transfer quarterbacks that I believe are going to have the biggest impact on their college teams. Now, we know that the transfer portal is a big thing in college football. It can make or break your team. And if you can find the right fit at quarterback in the portal, it could elevate you from a borderline 9-10 program to a program that ends up being good enough to win a national championship. Remember what happened with 2019 Joe Burrow and LSU? Same thing with guys like Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, who also utilized the transfer portal. So I'm here to give you guys my list of 6 transfer portal quarterbacks this season that are going to have big impacts this year. We're going to start off with Aiden Childs, who followed Jonathan Smith from Oregon State to Michigan State. He was a 4-star recruit in the 2023 recruiting cycle. He was the second best transfer portal quarterback according to 24/7 Sports. And one thing about Aiden Childs is that he may be unproven, but if you just watch a little bit of his film from Oregon State spring game, you're going to be really amazed with just how great of a dual threat quarterback this dude is. I mean, he can make every single throw. He has a fantastic arm. He's really accurate throwing the ball outside of the pocket, and he's a really dynamic runner. He has one of those Jaden Daniels kind of running styles. He's really sticky in the open field, really nimble, really quick on his feet. Aiden Childs also has really good size for somebody who hasn't played that much. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. So when you think about Michigan State and them having Jonathan Smith as their head coach and getting Aiden Childs in the transfer portal, it could be potentially one of those situations where you got a first-year head coach who hits the ground running immediately because he found the right guy at quarterback. Michigan State may not have the greatest team around them, but when you got a great quarterback, it can make up for some deficiencies that you may have. And the Big Ten isn't really that strong this year as people think. Outside of Oregon and, Ohio State, everybody else, you don't really know how good they're truly going to be. Some may say Penn State, but we don't really know about them. They have some new coordinators up there. We'll see how that'll go. They also have some problems at wide receiver. And Aiden Childs, if he ends up reaching his potential right out the gate under Jonathan Smith, he could be the best quarterback in the Big Ten immediately. Cameron Ward was one of the biggest transfer portal pickups that the Miami Hurricanes have ever had. Probably the biggest. The last biggest pickup they had was years ago when they got De'Aaron King, and then after him it was Jalen Phillips. But Cam Ward, as a Hurricane fan myself, I'm really happy that we have him underneath center this year. He's going to be the perfect fit in Shannon Dawson's offense. He already comes from an air raid style offense that he played in his last 2 years starting at Washington State. And this guy is a really good quarterback. And at one point, he was the most underrated quarterback in college football because initially he went unranked out of high school. And then he went to Incarnate World. He won the Jerry Rice Award, which is awarded to the most outstanding freshman of that season. And not only that, he threw like 40 plus touchdowns during one of his years at Incarnate World. So then he goes to Washington State, and he's a little bit under the radar because Washington State isn't really that much of a household name. So not a lot of people know about him. But this past season, he got a lot of attention because, he hit the portal and he was a fairly decent quarterback that people probably look him up and they see the stats and like, oh yeah, like, give me him. And it was really weird, the whole saga he had getting to Miami, because initially, he's taking a visit to Miami. He's taking a visit to the Ops, Florida State. And then he's flirting with some other teams. And then he just decides to declare for the NFL draft. And then everybody's like, bro, what the hell are you doing declaring for the NFL draft, man? Like, you better off coming back and playing another season of college ball and improving your draft stock. But then, out of nowhere, like, Mario Cristobal, being a great recruiter that he is, flips him from the draft to Miami. Now, they probably had to dish out a lot of money to get him, but who cares? The Miami Hurricanes finally have a great quarterback. And that's the only thing that this team has been missing that's been keeping them from being able to compete for an ACC title. Like, the best season I've seen the Miami Hurricanes have, Malik Rozier was the starting quarterback when they won 10 games and lost to Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl. Imagine if you would have had a better quarterback on that team that season. That team possibly could have won the national championship with how good the defense was. The defense should be really good next season. The offensive line is going to be great. And the receivers, there's some slight concerns there, but there's a lot of upside at the receiver position for Miami. And then we know how stout they are at running back. So Cam Ward could finally be the missing piece that Miami has been looking for to finally get the U truly back in the national spotlight and people back talking about the U and people finally selling back out the games. Because the last time Miami was popping and people were paying attention, Hard Rock used to be rocking. And I remember when they beat Notre Dame and Virginia Tech during the stretch, when they were playing those two teams at home and you couldn't even hear anything. So Cam Ward was a huge pickup for the Miami Hurricanes. He's in an offense that he should be very familiar with a lot of playmakers around him. All he needs to do is stay healthy, do his thing, not get caught up with those strip clubs and the fine lights in Miami, and he should be a great pickup for the Hurricanes. He possibly could be a Heisman contender, depending on if the Hurricanes make it to the ACC championship or whatnot. But he easily right now, to me, is the best quarterback in this conference right now. Dylan Gabriel was, at one point, a Heisman contender last season. Now, eventually, he started to fall off the radar. He dealt with some injuries. Oklahoma had a couple of setbacks, but he had 42 total touchdowns last season. And I was really surprised that he just opted transferred out of Oklahoma. Now, Jackson Darnold, I get the dude was highly touted coming out of high school, but he didn't look too hot in the Alamo Bowl. And the fact that he's going to Oregon with Will Stein being the offensive coordinator, who's one of the best OCs in college football, he's potentially going to be a head coach next year. Dylan Gabriel potentially could win the Heisman this year. Oregon has everything. They got great offensive linemen, receivers that are really good. Tess Johnson comes back. You picked up Evan Stewart out of the transfer portal. You set at running back. Dylan Gabriel right now is currently the best quarterback in the Big Ten. You're looking for a championship pedigree transfer portal quarterback? Dylan Gabriel is that guy. KJ Jefferson is a really underrated quarterback that not a lot of people have been talking about. Now, initially, prior to last season, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC before he got ruined by their previous OC once Kendall Briles left. Now, he's going to UCF to go play for the Gus Bus. And the Gus Bus hasn't really had great quarterback play over his last couple of years coaching. Even his last few years at Auburn, the best QB play he was getting was Jarrett Stidham. And Jarrett Stidham wasn't bad, but he wasn't great neither. He was just pretty good. KJ Jefferson is one of those guys that has the potential to be a program-changing quarterback if Gus Malzahn knows what to do with him and you can utilize him properly. And the difference in KJ Jefferson's game between guys like John Rice Plumlee and quarterbacks Gus Malzahn has worked with in the past is that he's not just a great runner. He's a pretty good passer. He makes really good decisions with the football. He doesn't really have a high turnover number. Last season was the most interceptions that he ever threw in the year. But previously, he didn't throw more than 5 INTs. He's also pretty accurate with the ball. And he's really dynamic when he decides to tuck and run. And you look at that size that he has. He's like 245 pounds at 6'3". Nobody want to see that in the open field. And Gus Malzahn likes to run a lot of design quarterback runs. But if he can find a way to just get a little bit more out of KJ Jefferson as a passer, this could be the best quarterback that he's ever had. And he could be the difference in UCF being a 6-win team and maybe winning the Big 12 conference. Like, the Big 12 doesn't really have a lot of strong quarterbacks outside of Shedeur Sanders and Quinn Ewers. KJ Jefferson, if he ends up being a great fit in Gus Malzahn's system, UCF is a really good dark horse pick to win the Big 12 this year. Brock Vandagriff was riding the bench the last couple of seasons that he was at Georgia. All right. And he was one of those guys that had a lot of hype coming out of high school. He was a 5-star recruit. And then he got to Georgia and you didn't really hear anything from him. Now, it's not like he didn't get any playing time because he wasn't good. It's just one of those situations where I feel the guys that were above him were just better than him. And maybe he just didn't get enough opportunities to show what he can do in practice. But Kentucky is a really good situation right now. And Kentucky, with the expanding college football playoffs now, is easily one of those teams that could sneak their way into that thing. Yeah, they may not consistently be a team that always is having 10-win seasons, but every 3-4 years, Mark Stoops pulls off a 10-win season. And if they can get good quarterback play out of Brock Vandagriff, they could easily be a contender in the SEC this year because they're going to have a really good defense. Their defensive line is going to be nasty next year. The offensive line should be back to the standard that they always hold themselves to at that position. One of the best in college football. And they got really good receivers. They got 2 of the better receivers in the SEC. And we know how good they always are at running back. So Brock Vandagriff, if he can give them good, consistent quarterback play, at least better than what we got out of Devin Leary, Kentucky should be able to compete because they got a really talented roster that's going to have a lot of experience, a lot of returning production coming back. So Brock Vandagriff, if he can be one of those quarterbacks that ends up giving you 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, that could be good enough to get you into the SEC championship because you got it all, but just a great quarterback. Even Will Levis wasn't that good, and many people regard him to be the best quarterback that Kentucky has had in recent memory. So I don't think the standard is all too high. So Brock Vandagriff is a quarterback that not a lot of people are talking about. He was a 9th-ranked quarterback in the transfer portal. I think he's going to be really good. He has pretty good athleticism, a really good arm, and he can throw from a lot of different arm angles, and I think that he throws with pretty good touch. I like the way that the ball comes out of his hands when he throws it. Will Howard, he was the starter at Kansas State the last 2 years, and he got replaced for the younger quarterback that we had on they had on the roster, who was a true freshman. But it still didn't mean that Will Howard wasn't really good, and it wasn't like he was splitting reps with the guy. It was 50-50. Majority of the time, the only time that he sat out and got replaced was when they were doing design quarterback runs. Will Howard was probably the second or the third best quarterback in the Big 12. He reminds me a lot of Kyle Trask when he was at Florida, but with a little bit more mobility. Now, he's not somebody that's going to be a burner in the ground game for you, but he has enough athleticism where you can do some quarterback powers to the outside and you can pick up 5-6 yards. Like Chip Kelly can have a lot of fun with Will Howard. That's the offensive coordinator. And they already are stacked at wide receiver. The only thing they need to work on is beefing up the interior of their offensive line. I mean, other than that, Will Howard has everything necessary to put up Heisman numbers. If Will Howard isn't going for 40 touchdowns, and maybe 5 or 7 interceptions, completing 66 or higher % of his passes, then this would be a really disappointing opportunity for him. This is a great team to help boost up your draft stock. This is a great team to help you get the Heisman Trophy. They're going to run the football with Quinshon Judkins and, Trevion Henderson. Or if he's even coming back, I think he's coming back. I don't know for certain. But, there's enough for Will Howard to put up Heisman video game-like numbers. So anything other but a Heisman campaign for Will Howard will be a disappointing season in my book. But this is it for my 6 biggest impact quarterback transfers for this offseason, or my biggest impact quarterback transfer report. My biggest impact quarterback transfers for this upcoming college football season. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Now let's segue to this. Mark Elko, in his first season as the head coach at Duke, won 9 games. And now he's entering his first season as head coach of Texas A&M. And he has a top 10 roster. All right. Texas A&M may have lost a lot of talented big name players to the portal, but they still have recruited so well that a lot of the guys from their last couple of recruiting cycles are still there. And you also happen to have one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC returning, and Connor Wigman. Now, when Connor Wigman was healthy, he was pretty good. Now, with him being in a better situation, their offensive coordinator is really good. He's been productive everywhere he's been. And the staff that Mark Elko has assembled around Connor Wigman should be able to have Connor Wigman playing like a top 3 quarterback in the SEC this year. They also have really good receivers. They got a really good offensive line. And defensively, they should be way better than what they were last season. Like, it's crazy how we all had questions about how good was the offense going to be, and the defense was going to be elite again. And then it seems like the roles were reversed. The offense was good, but the defense sucked. It's just like they can never have the best of both worlds. This year, you can be a truly balanced football team. And Connor Wigman, giving you consistent quarterback play, is what's going to allow you to hang around in the new SEC. Because you see, the SEC is really tough this year with, the new changes that they made to the schedule, getting rid of divisions, conference realignment has just changed a lot of things with the dynamics of this conference. But for Texas A&M, though, thanks to that, they got a really big break. Because a lot of their toughest games this season, guess what, are at home. And with Mike Elko having a really talented team, he's going to be able to beat these teams like Texas or Mizzou, LSU at home. It's like the football gods bless Texas A&M with one of the easiest schedules and the most difficult conference in college football. Like, their biggest road game this year is against Florida or South Carolina, depending on who's going to be better, or maybe Auburn, who possibly could be a team that ends up, coming out of nowhere and surprising everybody under Hugh Freeze. But Mike Elko, without the schedule lines up for him, your toughest road game being against Auburn? Come on, there's no reason why Texas A&M possibly couldn't win maybe 10 plus games. And that gets me to my biggest point. This could be one of those hires that just works right out the gate. Remember Brian Kelly? His first season at LSU, he hit the ground running. Lincoln Riley, year one at USC. Mike Elko, with the talent that he already is inheriting, the fact that he was able to win 9 games his first season at Duke, I really don't see how Texas A&M isn't a factor for the SEC championship this year. The talent's there, the coaching is going to be there, and the schedule lines up perfectly for them. This could be a magical season for Mike Elko. And every year, there always seems to be a first-time head coach or a head coach at a different school for his first season that ends up just having a Cinderella run. We saw it happen with Sonny Dykes at TCU. We saw it somewhat happen with Lincoln Riley, his first season at USC. Jeff Brom this year at Louisville. Well, last year. So Mike Elko, with how good of a coach he is, winning at Duke, if you're sleeping on Texas A&M, you better wake up. Because this is a really good team that Mike Elko has going into 2024. And the SEC is wide open. The only teams that really are, really up there in terms of the hierarchy of who's a lead, who's going to be in the championship picture, is Georgia, Texas, and Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is beatable. And so is Texas and Georgia because you have rosters that are good enough to go toe-to-toe with them. Maybe not Georgia, but probably Texas. Because guess what? You're in Texas, so you got the same access to money that the Longhorns do. So you can buy guys out of the portal. You can buy guys out of high school. It doesn't matter. So Mike Elko, man, I'm trying to tell you guys, his first season is going to be dynamite. Just watch. Just watch. Now, the last thing we got to talk about, oh my God. Billy Naiper has a lot of pressure going into the 2024 college football season. He's been known as a program developer, a program builder. Let's start that over. There's a lot of pressure on Billy Naiper going into 2024. He's in year 3. His first 2 seasons have not been that great. Year 1, 6 wins. You get whacked by Oregon State in your bowl game. And then year 2, you're expecting to go up. Because progress, you expect to always be going upwards. But you know what they say, sometimes progress isn't always linear. And with Billy Naiper going into his 3rd season at Florida, this has to be the season where the progress isn't stagnant and the progress isn't going down. Florida has to win some games. And he's in a really difficult situation to win those games because Florida has probably the toughest schedule in all of college football this year. There's a stretch where after their bye week, they have to play Georgia in the Florida-Georgia game. They go on the road to play Texas, have to play LSU right after that, Ole Miss, and then travel on the road to play Florida State. And even before their bye week, they got to play Tennessee on the road. Then they got to play Kentucky. Hell, they start the season out playing the Hurricanes, man. It is not going to be easy for Billy Naiper to make a strong first impression in this 3rd season. Well, first impression, I wouldn't even call it a first impression anymore. He's trying to make a good impression to save his job is what I'm trying to say. Because if he isn't able to get you to 7 wins this season, with how tough the SEC is, you wonder if he even is going to be the right guy to get another season for you. And I get that. There are a lot of obstacles that Billy Naiper has had to overcome internally with Florida. The NIL back-end wasn't always ideal when he first got there. And then we saw how ugly the Jalen Rashada situation turned out. But at the same time, there are things that Billy Naiper has to make changes to. And he's made those changes. He's brought in some new coaches. Maybe he gives up play calling responsibilities. Hopefully he does, because he's not really good at it. Austin Armstrong, he hired him last season as his defensive coordinator, and we didn't really see too much improvement on that side of the ball. So we expect to see some improvement this season with Austin Armstrong going into year 2. And Florida, even though they do have a lot of unproven players, they do have a lot of talent. All right. The recruiting for Billy Naiper has not been up to expectations. And I was really shocked to see that they only finished in the 12th to 18th range in recruiting the last couple of years, because the last 2 years in July, August, they always had so much recruiting momentum. And then as the season progresses, the momentum just seems to die off and the recruiting classes just seem to fall apart. And if Billy Naiper isn't recruiting at a high level and he's not producing on the field, then you have to part ways with him after this season. I mean, you fired Dan Mullen for getting you to a SEC championship. So anything less than that is a fireable offense. And Dan Mullen wasn't even considered to be that great of a coach, not because he wasn't great on the field, but because he wasn't that great of a recruiter. Well, his recruiting classes were no worse than what Billy Naipier's are right now. Like, Billy Naiper should be recruiting at a top 10, top 5 level at Florida. Like, you can say, well, the NIL stuff and everything that he may have to deal with internally that may be holding him back. But come on, man, it's Florida. You know, it's the swamp that you play at. You're playing and you're coaching at an iconic program. And you're coaching and recruiting in one of the most talent-rich states in all of the nation. As a matter of fact, the most talented. Come on, man. Like, Billy Naiper has to get it together. And I don't know if he is. And I really like Billy Naiper. I really do, because weirdly, I used to watch a lot of games when he was coaching at Louisiana. And it was really weird because I just had a strong liking to Elijah Mitchell, and they always were playing on ABC. So I'm rooting for Billy Naiper to succeed, but right now, it just seems like he has his back against the wall and he's praying for a miracle. And he really does need a miracle, because with this schedule, oh my goodness, I'm trying to tell you, like, they had it out for Billy Naiper this year. After their bye week, they have to play Georgia on the road against Texas, LSU at home, Ole Miss, and then on the road against FSU. That is sick. That is so sick. If Billy Naiper ends up winning 9 games, he has to win Coach of the Year. He has to win it. Because it just seems like all the odds are stacked against him. You got a team that's fairly young, fairly unproven. You got a lot of questions with your coaching staff. Hell, you got a lot of questions about you. And the Florida season starts off with the loss to Miami. It's not going to be good for the rest of the season. And the reason why I say that is because games like those can be so important, because it can dictate how you start the season off. If you can win your first game against your rival, do you not know how much momentum and confidence that gives your team moving forward? That's what you need when you have this tough of a schedule. You need to pull out some miracles. And it doesn't matter how Billy Naiper wins this year. He doesn't need to win in impressive fashion. He just needs to find ways to win. It needs to be ugly. It has to be. And it's going to be. Because they don't really have a lot of talent that gives you a lot of optimism that says, oh yeah, like Florida is going to be able to explode offensively, or they're going to be a team that can win with their defense. They don't really have identity. And that's something that this team has struggled to find under Billy Naiper. Not just that, but every time you watch them, they just find ways to beat themselves. So this season for Billy Naiper, it's do or die. It's win or go home. Because if you can't find a way to win with this schedule, how are you ever going to find a way to win? Because you can't say, oh, we had such a tough schedule, when you're going to have a tough schedule every single season because it's just the SEC. It's just that, next season, you probably will get blessed with a couple of more home games because it sucks that some of your most important games, you got to go on the road. But for Billy Napier, man, it's no more excuses. You've been at Florida for 3 years. All right, you got your guys in. You should have those guys recruited. Those guys getting on the field, and they should be producing. And you got to make the right hires. And you got to get better with the play calling. So if Billy Napier has another season where they don't win more than 6 games, I think it's wraps. I mean, Shane Beamer overachieved at South Carolina. And it's way, way more difficult to win that South Carolina than it is to win that Florida. Imagine if Florida had Shane Beamer right now. They probably could have damn near been second place in the SEC next year. He's just one of those guys that knows how to win. Billy Napier, I believe he knows how to win, but can he find the right way to win? That's the question with him. And that's what's going to define if we're having this conversation about Billy Napier at the end of the year. And if we're going to be discussing if he's going to be back for another season, if he's going to get fired, if he doesn't already get fired throughout the season. I mean, you can say, well, his buyout, JT, I mean, listen, when it comes to all the money that's coming in and out of college football, I don't really think that a buyout is too big of a concern when it comes to a school like Florida, potentially. But this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoy it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you check out the podcast in audio format on Apple, Google, Spotify, and